Lee Van Cleef and John Wayne, two iconic figures of Western cinema, reportedly had a strained relationship marked by personal and professional differences. While concrete details are scarce, various accounts suggest underlying tensions between the two actors. But this video will reveal the whole untold story between them. Curious? Then comment 1 if you like Lee Van Cleef or 2 for John Wayne, and join us. You may be shocked if you hear the truth behind their relationship. Tense and hostile relationship with John Wayne. Lee Van Cleef and John Wayne's strained and adversarial relationship was about more than just professional competitiveness. Nobody loathed him more than Lee Van Cleef. To the uninitiated eye, it may appear strange that two prominent artists from the same genre despise each other so intensely. Behind the scenes, however, a constant battle was driven by their opposing personalities, political views, work ethics, and careers. Van Cleef, well known for his angular features and ferociously adversarial roles in spaghetti westerns, was not a fan of John Wayne, the legendary character of American westerns who was frequently depicted as the heroic moral hero. The two actors' animosity continued for years, impacting their interactions in the film industry and becoming part of Hollywood folklore. Their divergent acting styles led considerably to Van Cleef's hatred for Wayne. As a method actor, Van Cleef devoted his all to his roles, portraying the ethically complicated character. He was precise and frequently adopted a gloomy, silent approach to performing the morally complicated roles that earned him fame. On the other hand, John Wayne was famous for playing the same character in multiple films, the silent, powerful cowboy who epitomized stoic masculinity and upheld traditional values. Van Cleef felt the acting lacked depth and nuance. He perceived Wayne as arrogant and smug because he depended on his persona rather than his adaptability. Van Cleef regarded Wayne as Hollywood's shallow side, relying on a legendary figure without expanding his acting skills. Their political difference. Their differences became increasingly obvious as a result of the political debates between the two men. John Wayne was a well-known conservative who frequently pushed for right-wing causes and publicly backed the nationalism of the United States of America. He publicly supported. In the 1960s and 1970s, he was a prominent player in the movement to promote traditional American ideas, which he believed to be perilous in the context of the period of social change that was occurring. In general, he was more inclined toward progressive values. On the other hand, Lee Van Cleef was more reserved when it came to his political opinions. He was a supporter of the counterculture movement, which was a movement that rejected American imperialism and traditional conventions and moved toward more progressive beliefs. Reports indicate that Van Cleef saw Wayne's political bravado as reprehensible and regarded his unwavering support for conservatism and militarism as an indication of a restricted point of view. From the perspective of Van Cleef, Wayne's public image was a continuation of his on-screen identity as the determined, self-righteous cowboy who was oblivious to the complexity of the world that existed outside of his vision. The already tense working relationship between them was further aggravated by their disagreement for political reasons. Their dissimilar perspectives on stardom and the manner in which they managed their careers in Hollywood were further factors that contributed to their animosity. Early on in his career, John Wayne established himself as a celebrity and remained on the A-list for his whole career, due to the fact that he was regarded as an American hero and garnered the admiration of spectators. He possessed a level of power and control over his work that was unparalleled by other performers. Because of men like Wayne, his roles were overshadowed. Nevertheless, Van Cleef's career in the film industry was marked by a greater degree of turmoil. During the early stages of his career, he was frequently overshadowed by prominent actors like as Wayne, who put him in supporting roles as the adversary. It wasn't until Van Cleef became popular in the westerns of the 1960s, particularly in Sergio Leone's films like For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that he received the recognition he deserved as a major actor. It was a source of frustration for Van Cleef that Hollywood which was dominated by superstars such as Wayne, had pigeonholed him for such a long period of time, and that even at that time, his fame was very insignificant in comparison to Wayne's. Because he thought that celebrities like Wayne monopolized the spotlight, he had a deep-seated resentment for Wayne. He believed that this created a limited potential for other people to achieve success. The two guys had deeper personal concerns as a result of their interactions that took place away from the camera. When it came to his professional and social interactions, Van Cleef claimed that Wayne was a pompous and domineering individual. Wayne had a well-deserved reputation for being a force to be reckoned with in the business world, and for occasionally insisting that things be carried out accordingly. Additionally, he was an introvert and reticent in his daily life, and his lavish nature extended beyond the confines of his job. Van Cleef detested this bravado and would frequently steer clear of social gatherings at which Wayne would be present. This was due to the fact that Wayne was more reserved and introverted in his inner life. When the two did make contact with one another, there was a discernible moment of tension between them, as stated by the set reports. It has been reported that Wayne did not take Van Cleef's talents into consideration, viewing him as little more than a character actor who was skilled at portraying antagonists, but lacked the charisma and star power necessary to play a key role. Instead, Wayne attributed Van Cleef's success to chance and timing. Van Cleef, who was of the opinion that Wayne's success was more of a product of timing and chance than it was of innate skill, was infuriated by this approach. A further factor that contributed to the professional competition between Van Cleef and Wayne was the fact that they were vying for dominance in the Western genre, which had reached its pinnacle during their respective careers. As time went on, Van Cleef became frequently linked to the darker and more morally questionable figures who appeared in spaghetti westerns. At the same time, Wayne was a symbol of the classic Hollywood westerns, which frequently included protagonists and antagonists who had different personalities. The difficulties were well portrayed in his western style. There is a striking difference between Wayne's more traditional westerns, such as The Searchers or True Grit, and pictures like The Good, Bad, and Ugly. Despite the fact that Wayne's films perpetuated outmoded ideas of American exceptionalism and frontier justice, Van Cleef believed that his Western style was more effective in capturing the complexities of the real world. This ideological disagreement between their portrayals of the Wild West only heightened Van Cleef's disdain for Wayne, which was already a strong feeling in his heart. He was of the opinion that Wayne's portrayal of Western heroes was excessively utopian and that it failed to take into account the moral complexities that were present in the actual development of the American West. During the motion picture production of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 1962, there was a noteworthy incident that brought to light the possibility of strife. As a result of the pressure that he felt from the studio, director John Ford reportedly placed John Wayne in the character of Tom Doniphan. Wayne was not happy with this decision. It has been said that Ford's displeasure caused him to taunt Wayne during the filming, which contributed to the hostile environment that existed on site. Lee Van Cleef, who also made an appearance in the movie, was able to witness this interplay and make a note of Ford's character in relation to Wayne. Furthermore, it is possible that Van Cleef's early professional decisions were a contributing factor to the confrontation. Van Cleef, for example, was offered the part of Harvey Pell during the casting process for High Noon, 1952, but he denied the opportunity after being urged to have cosmetic surgery to modify his nose. Instead, he agreed to take on a more reserved and non-speaking character. Considering that this decision reflected his dedication to realism, it is possible that it would have been in conflict with the more conventional Hollywood image that stars like Wayne strive to portray. Values and ideologies. In the end, the tension that had existed between John Wayne and Lee Van Cleef for a considerable amount of time was the result of a complex combination of personal, professional, and political concerns. The antagonism that existed between Van Cleef and Wayne stemmed from a more basic clash of principles and ideals than it did from a direct competition for roles or celebrity. As the face of a sanitized narrative of American history and a Hollywood system that frequently neglected more complicated and difficult performances, Wayne perfectly epitomized everything that Van Cleef detested about the entertainment industry. Working in an area where people like Wayne predominated served as a constant reminder of Van Cleef's career disappointments, and this bitterness lasted until the end of his life. Van Cleef's life was tragically cut short and he passed away. The two of them had a strong aversion to one another. The narrative of the two men's unyielding hostility against one another, a dispute that has become as much a part of the history of Hollywood as the films in which they acted, will forever be intertwined with their respective reputations. The man behind Lee Van Cleef, known for his iconic performances in westerns, where he often portrayed the steely-eyed villain with calm passion and accuracy, Lee Van Cleef was a unique presence in American film. Van Cleef's path to Hollywood fame was anything but ordinary. After serving in the U.S. Navy during World War II, he transitioned to acting, bringing to the film a genuine gritty and weary feeling that few others could match. Van Cleef immediately established himself as one of the most captivating character performers of his time because of his high cheekbones, penetrating eyes, and dominating manner, from supporting to leading man. Even though he starred in several movies in the 1950s and 1960s, he didn't become well known worldwide until he worked with Italian filmmaker Sergio Leone, most notably on For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Particularly in the spaghetti western genre, these parts helped him transition from a supporting character to a main one. Off-screen, Van Cleef was a quiet, orderly man who loved his family and work. As an actor who transformed villains into heroes and made a significant contribution to cinema history, his legacy lives on as a representation of the richness of Western narrative. His distinctive facial features, narrow eyes, pointed cheekbones, and an inherently strong presence would eventually become his on-screen signatures. However, Van Cleef's early years were characterized by self-control, humble origins, and a calm resolve that would serve him well in the uncertain world of acting before he became a mainstay of Hollywood thrillers and Italian spaghetti westerns. The Great Depression. Van Cleef was raised in a Dutch-American working-class family during the Great Depression. Clarence Leroy, Van Cleef Sr., his father, was an expert watchmaker. This line of work inspired Lee's subsequent appreciation of accuracy and craftsmanship, which would become essential to his acting style. He inherited a strong appreciation for family and tradition from his homemaker mother, Marion Lavinia Van Fleet. During Lee's early years, the Van Cleef family traveled about a little before settling in Somerville, a tiny town where Lee went to high school. Quiet, observant, and intensely focused, Van Cleef's calm, perceptive, and laser-like attention were hallmarks of his childhood that carried over into maturity. His early talent for mechanics and meticulous work led him to develop an interest in industrial skills. After graduating from high school, Van Cleef temporarily sought a career in accounting and office work, but the start of World War II fundamentally altered his course. He enlisted for the U.S. Navy. Van Cleef joined the U.S. Navy in 1942 at barely 17. After being deployed to a submarine chaser, he served as a sonar technician and radar expert aboard a minesweeper in the North Atlantic and Caribbean. His time in the military would endure the whole war and have a profound physical and psychological impact on him. He achieved the rank of Sonarman First Class and was honorably discharged in 1946. A desire to forge a different path, after the war, Van Cleef returned to civilian life with a renewed maturity and determination to change directions. He thought about returning to work in industry for a while, but his interest in the arts grew. He started taking acting classes at the Little Theatrical Group in Clinton, New Jersey, with the support of friends and local theatrical connections. Van Cleef began to stand out during this period because of his rugged appearance and dominating attitude. When he made his theatrical debut in a provincial production of Our Town, directors and viewers could see his undeveloped talent, the foundation for his career, working class ideals, military discipline, and quiet ambition characterized Lee Van Cleef's early years, which set the stage for a career that would eventually establish him as a timeless figure of evil in movies, even though it would take some time for him to become famous. The foundation for his success was laid during those early years when he learned to face life's harsh truths with courage and tenacity, carved out a distinctive legacy. Because of his powerful on-screen character, sharp features, and penetrating eyes, Lee Van Cleef made an indelible influence on the entertainment industry in Hollywood. Despite the fact that Van Cleef is best known for his work in action and Western films, he left an indelible mark on both American and Italian cinema, especially as a result of his crucial roles in spaghetti westerns. Van Cleef's distinct on-screen demeanor and abilities finally rocketed him to legendary fame, leaving an indelible mark on the motion picture industry. This was despite the fact that he began his career in minor roles, some of which were adversarial. Getting his start in Hollywood beginning in the early 1950s, Van Cleef began his career in the entertainment industry in Hollywood. His first notable role was in the film High Noon, which he played in 1952. In the film, he played Jack Colby, one of the bandits who was silent but dangerous. In spite of the fact that he had very few words, he emerged as a noteworthy figure owing to his dominating look and his quiet menace. Throughout the 1950s, Van Cleef was frequently cast in the role of a supporting villain in a variety of crime dramas and westerns. This was most likely due to the fact that his fiery disposition and sharp features made him a typecast. Director Sergio Leone, on the other hand, Van Cleef's career took a huge and life-altering turn in the 1960s as a result of the spaghetti western craze that was driven by the Italian director Sergio Leone. By the time Van Cleef was hired in the role of Colonel Douglas Mortimer in the 1965 film For a Few Dollars More, his renown had already begun to spread throughout the globe. His performance was a demonstration of his unbridled emotion, his appeal, calmness, and his delicate refinement. It was via this role that Van Cleef demonstrated his capacity to handle a significant amount of screen time while maintaining a mesmerizing presence, which was comparable to that of Clint Eastwood. Angel Eyes, The Evil One. As a result of Van Cleef's portrayal of the enigmatic and nuanced Angel Eyes in Leone's classic film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which was released in 1966, he became an internationally recognized actor. The performance of Van Cleef as the antagonist among the three namesake characters was eerie and understated, achieving a balance between brutality and a disturbing tranquility in his approach to the role. The portrayal that he gave in this film is widely regarded as one of the most outstanding villain performances in the history of film. One of the most notable characters in European westerns, Van Cleef came to popularity in European westerns throughout the late 1960s and early 1970s, appearing in a number of films such as Sabata, Day of Anger, and Death Rides a Horse. In addition to the masterpieces that Leone created, Van Cleef was also a prominent figure in the cinema industry. He was able to portray anti-heroes and lone gunmen in these roles, which attracted to audiences due to the subtlety and moral ambiguity of the characters he played. In addition to providing more validation for the spaghetti western genre, his fame indicated that American actors and actresses could be successful in international films. Follow the cult action films through Fan and the Night. Van Cleef garnered the admiration of a new generation of fans by appearing in cult action films such as Escape from New York and the television show The Master, in which he played the role of a ninja who had received instruction in martial arts. Through the entirety of his career, he continued to retain his dominant presence. Among the many things that Lee Van Cleef has brought to Hollywood, one of his achievements is his ability to redefine the character of a reluctant hero and later a villain on film. As a result of his work in both Italian and American films, he became a legend across the Atlantic in the eyes of every succeeding cinematic anti-hero, as well as in the harsh close-ups of Western standoffs. Resilience, reinvention, and mastery of his art, his legacy will go on forever. A career that spanned more than half a century was enjoyed by the well-known actor Lee Van Cleef. He became one of the most recognizable and well-known characters in the Western genre as a result of his depictions of villains, which had an influence that lasted for a relatively long time on the genre. The stern appearance, sharp features, and penetrating eyes that Van Cleef possessed made him an ideal choice for portraying ruthless and crafty antagonists in a number of films that were of exceptional quality. On the other hand, his story is about more than just villainy. It requires a combination of ability, imagination, and determination. A strong sense of discipline. Growing up in Somerville, New Jersey, Van Cleef developed a strong work ethic and a sense of his early upbringing was significantly impacted by his father, a watchmaker, who instilled in him the importance of accuracy and meticulousness. Van Cleef served in the United States during World War II, served in the Navy as a combatant and radio operator. Much of his subsequent performances were influenced by his experiences during the war, which gave him a distinct advantage when he portrayed tough, no-nonsense characters. University of South Carolina. After the war, Van Cleef studied for an engineering degree at the University of South Carolina. He relocated to Hollywood to try his luck in the entertainment business. Nevertheless, the acting scene immediately drew him in. He first acted in small, uncredited movie parts, often playing cowboys, soldiers, or other supporting roles. His career didn't take off until he attracted the attention of director Sergio Leone. High Noon Van Cleef's Hollywood career started unluckily with small parts in movies like High Noon in 1952, in which he portrayed a threatening silent henchman. Because of his sharp-edged, angular features, he was often typecast in evil parts, especially in westerns, where his appearance and mannerisms looked to represent the brutal, seasoned outlaw. Throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, he performed small, uncredited parts in TV series and movies, gradually establishing himself as a trustworthy character actor. Van Cleef's career, however, stalled despite his expanding collection of work since he was limited to portraying flat villains. He found it difficult to escape this typecasting, and personal problems, such as health problems after a vehicle accident, further hampered his career. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Van Cleef's big break came when he was chosen to play the vicious gunman Angel Eyes in Sergio Leone's renowned Dollars trilogy, which included the 1966 movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Despite Clint Eastwood's famous role as the man with no name, Van Cleef's depiction of the ruthless but accomplished bounty hunter had a lasting effect on both reviewers and viewers. His portrayal was characterized by a terrifying intensity that gave the cliched villain stereotype more nuance. A natural fit for playing the villain, Van Cleef was a perfect choice for the villain role because of his unique appearance, which included prominent cheekbones, an angular face, and eyes that appeared to penetrate through his opponents. His career was distinguished by a string of noteworthy parts in other westerns, such as The Big Gun Down, 1966, in which he played a lawman who turned hunter, and For a Few Dollars More, 1965, in which he played the crafty bandit Colonel Douglas Mortimer. His reputation as a man of few words, but many deeds in these movies cemented his status as one of the most outstanding Western performers. Added complexity. In contrast to the archetypal villain, Van Cleef never depicted antagonists in a straightforward manner. It was because of the intensity and subtlety that he brought to his roles that his characters were more than merely opponents. There were many instances in which his characters were driven by their moral ideals, even when those principles were in direct opposition to the law or to the conventions of society. Van Cleef portrayed geriatric gunslingers in films such as Death Rides a Horse, 1967, and Day of Anger, 1967, who, despite living beyond the law, possessed a sad dignity owing to their experience and expertise. These films were released in 1967 due to his ability to depict both vulnerability and dread on film. He ended up being one of the most adored performers in the genre. After then, he started playing a wider variety of roles. However, despite the fact that he became a legend in the Western genre, Van Cleef's skills extended beyond the Western genre. During the 1970s and 1980s, Van Cleef began his career as an actor by appearing in a variety of roles, including those in action films and television series. Due to his unique voice and commanding manner, he was an ideal option for roles in films such as Escape from New York, 1981, in which he played the menacing Hawk, and The Octagon, 1980, in which he co-starred with martial artist Chuck Norris. Both of these films were released in the 90s. By transitioning to action films, he was able to widen his acting repertoire and attract a new generation of admirers. The Master helped him do this. Additionally, Van Cleef has been in a number of television episodes, including The Master, which aired in 1984 and featured him with Timothy Van Patten in the role of a proficient martial arts instructor. Due to the fact that he appeared on television, he was able to reach even wider audiences, which helped to solidify his image as an actor who could play several roles. In his personal life, Lee Van Cleef was defined by a number of significant relationships, sad occurrences, and family loyalty. However, his on-screen performances, which were often intense and memorable, occasionally overshadowed his personal life. His married life. The first marriage he ever had, which took place in 1943 and was to Patty Ruth Cale, was a pivotal moment in his life. Van Cleef, who was still in his late teens and early 20s at the time, maintained a balance between his expanding professional and personal responsibilities. Over the course of a considerable amount of time, Patty and Lee Van Cleef were responsible for the upbringing of three children, David, Alan, and Deborah. However, taking into account Van Cleef's frequent absences from work in Hollywood and the impact that an actor's erratic lifestyle may have on a family, it is likely that his home life was difficult. The couple's marriage was eventually terminated in 1958 after a period of 15 years. This was a difficult time for Van Cleef, who was also experiencing a short halt in his career at the time. Following his divorce with Patty, Van Cleef's personal life entered a new phase when he wed Joan Marjorie Drew in 1960. This marked the beginning of a new era in his life. The beginning of Van Cleef's romantic relationship with Joan coincided with an exciting phase in his career. Prior to this, he had completed a series of supporting roles in westerns and had taken a hiatus after being involved in an automobile accident that almost ended his career. For an additional few dollars, following his casting by Sergio Leone in the famous spaghetti western For a Few Dollars, again in 1965, Van Cleef's fortunes progressively improved. The film was directed by Sergio Leone. His performances in these films, which elevated him to the role of the leading man, had a significant impact on his image as a solid character actor in the industry. His ascent to global recognition was seen by Joan, who had been there for him during this crucial period of his life. On the other hand, the requirements of such a life were quite high. Despite the fact that they had comparable experiences throughout this critical period in his career, the couple's marriage, which lasted for 14 years, ended in divorce at the end of only 2 years later. In 1976, Van Cleef tied the knot with Barbara Haviland, and the couple would remain together for the remainder of his life. Van Cleef appeared to find some stability in his third marriage, which came after he had experienced a number of upheavals in both his personal and professional life. Barbara stayed at his side throughout the final years of his life, at a time when his health began to worsen and he was experiencing issues. Despite having heart problems and residual ramifications from his earlier injuries, Van Cleef continued to be active in the film industry during the 1970s. However, he appeared in a smaller number of prominent roles than he had in his peak. Barbara continued to be a devoted spouse during their 13 years of marriage, during which time Van Cleef increasingly disappeared from the public glare. She remained at his side until his death from a heart attack occurring. In addition, Van Cleef's personal life was marked by a dramatic accident that left a bodily reminder. It was when he was building a playhouse for his daughter Deborah that he suffered the ultimate loss of the joint on his right middle finger. In real life, the actor is a loving dad, yet on television he portrays himself as a severe and condescending individual. This event demonstrates the actor's split nature. His acting career was not greatly hindered by the fact that he lost a piece of his finger. He was able to improve his tough guy attitude in a variety of ways. Because Van Cleef was so proficient at disguising the injury throughout his performances, the audience paid little attention to the fact that he was missing a joint. On the other hand, it became a physical reminder of the sacrifices he made for his family and a part of his personality for those who worked closely with him. Even though the injury most likely required a significant amount of medical attention and rehabilitation time, Van Cleef did not allow it to keep him out of play for an extended period of time. He maintained his employment in Hollywood, demonstrating his dogged determination and unwavering dedication to his business and his position as a father. The end. In 1989, Lee Van Cleef passed away due to a heart attack. He was 64 years old at the time of his death. Because he was one of the last major emblems of Western film, his departure marked the end of an era in the film industry. Even after his passing, Van Cleef's legacy will live on as a result of the extensive work he produced. He made a significant contribution to the redefinition of the role of the antagonist in Westerns by changing a persona that had the potential to be one-dimensional into one that an audience would never forget. The films he directed were praised by cinema aficionados as well as academics. In the years that have passed since his death, his works have continued to get praise from audience members as well as academics, notably his contributions to the spaghetti western subgenre. As a result of his ability to mix charm with menace, as well as his aptitude for giving his roles several layers of depth, Van Cleef is a figure that will endure throughout the history of their respective films. It is hard to exaggerate the influence that Van Cleef had on the film industry, regardless of whether he was playing a staunch lawman, a charming crook, or a vicious bounty hunter. His performances in films such as For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly are considered to be among the best examples of Western filmmaking. His portrayals are considered to be among the most compelling that have ever been seen on screen. A testament to the power of imagination, tenacity, and the ability to create characters who remain in the minds of viewers long after the credits have rolled, Lee Van Cleef's career is a testament to the strength of creation. He was and continues to be an important character in the film industry. If you've made it this far in the video, you must have loved it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and enable the notifications bell icon. See you next time.